seeing what it's about. And along that way, you see varieties that people are making a decent job of them. They catch your eye, you think they've got potential. And I come back to growing, and I'd never had grown Marston Suzanne, but it had probably been a variety that was grown and then dropped by a lot of people for the next best thing. And I decided that was one that I was going to give a go. I could see potential in it. Dave's choice was the same, and it's become one that only a couple of us really have been successful with it. But I can see grown well, grown right, the quality in the bloom and the points that you might get from it. There's no edge in Winholm Diane, apart from it doesn't spot in the south where we grow. And it is the best small decorative out there. And us southern growers can grow it well. There's no secrets with Kenora Challenger, really, apart from it grows better up north than it does south. And it's one that you sort of need to go. And I regret, even that being a Terry Clark, I'm sure I would have had 3 pretty Kenora Valentine. I think with what is the norm rather than what I should have done. But I probably would have got better points from 3 really good Valentine than probably one of the worst vases of Challenger I've ever staged. And Valentine was another one. You know, when we started again, we decided to go for the Herbert Brown. Myself, Hospital and Dave Spencer. And we said, if we're going to do it, none of us grew giants. Each one of us was going to plant at least 20 plants of a giant deck. And I think Dave chose Sir Alf Ramsey, which was certainly the one of the moment. Andrew went down the large deck route and grew El Marie. And I'd remembered seeing some good flowers of Valentine that my dad grew quite a few years before. And when I said, I'm going to grow Valentine, certainly Dave sort of questioned my choices there. But it worked. It's a variety that then has probably become the variety of giant deck that is most used in multivase classes and has won more awards than any other. And probably, maybe because I grew 40 plants of it and I grew it well and showed what its potential might be rather than and the same with Candy. You know, I've never been any good with medium semis, but that one suited me, it suited the ground, fighting the ground with it. So it's finding edges. There's no point looking backwards and going, I know that Andrea Clark, what's these? Doesn't matter who grows that, you're never going to get top points with it. I don't think it's got the potential. There's a lot of varieties that are good, reliable workhorse varieties, but maybe not got the quality at the very highest level. And you've got to see those in it. There's a little bloom of Ross Lewis sticking out there, which was probably about 5 years after Ian used it in his Terry Clark. I saw it, loved it, grew it, and used it. And it's got the right credentials given it on the day. So look around. Don't just go for Kiwi, Moonlights, the obvious suspects, because they might not grow for you, and you're going to need other options. But do it with a mind, not just for fun. A complete method and stick to it. And what I mean by complete is that most people have seen what I do, you know, chop the plant down, do this, do that. I'm just taking one element of my growing and applying it to yours because it probably won't work. The amount of times I've given plants to people and there's a nice big soft plants that I try to produce and they say, I'm going to grow this. And then at the end of the season, they say it's no different to mine. Well, that's because they didn't grow it any different to theirs. They've just grown a plant the same way they would. So it won't be any different. So having a methodology is starting at the end and thinking what you want to achieve and then going back to the beginning and working out how you're going to achieve it. He's got some temperatures on his thing, and I think we've worked out that generally throughout the 3 months of the growing season, we are in the south about 5 degrees warmer every day on average, and with a lot less rainfall. So we have to adapt our methods differently to do that. So hence the double stopping that we tend to do. And if I know I'm going to do that, I won't plant out a young plant and double stop it. I'll plant out a big plant knowing I'm going to double stop it and get an engine underneath it first. So it's knowing what you're going to do and preparing correctly to do it. Not just going, oh, Dave says double stop, and you've got a plant with 3 pairs of leaves and you're trying to stop it twice in a matter of 2 weeks and think you're going to go to the town hall. It doesn't work that way. You've got to, it's part of a process, not just one element on its own. And I try with processes, I try to be different. I try to think of different ways of doing things. And throughout growing up with dahlias, I've heard all the old boys talking about how these wonderful giant decks, the ones that have just got best blooming show with, or it's just a fantastic example of that. And they tell me about, oh yeah, it come out from under the ground, this stem come up and it rose like a phoenix, and out come this monstrous, beautiful flower on the top. So with that in mind, and me now trying to grow giant decks for the 12 at the National, I thought, right, I'll have a method. So how do I get shoots out from under? You've got to grow them in the first place, and you've got to bury the plant. So I grew a larger plant than usual, and I shall continue to do this year. I took the cuttings 2 weeks earlier than most probably would do. I kept the plant soft, I kept it fed, and stripped at least 2 pairs of leaves off of the base of the plant, and maybe 3 in some cases, because they're all going to go underground when they're planted. And it's about having that aim. I want to get shoots from underground. How am I going to do it? I'm going to bury leaf joints and try and force them to come when I want them to. And it was a complete guesswork last year, but I got it about right timing wise. It's just problems come later. So then plants some marigold. You can see I've stripped off 2 pairs of leaves, left the 3rd pair on. Planting whole, this ground would have had a lot of feed in it, chicken pellets, bloodfish and bone. One allotment plot probably got about 40 kilos, so over a space for just short of 200 plants. But even then, deep hole, well prepared, because if you're going to go 9 inches under the ground, you need to make sure you've prepared 9 inches under the ground, not just skimmed a rotavator over the top and hope you find it. Good handful of chicken pellets in there and lots of water. The big holes, as I've always said, are plant in a well and allow that to backfill, so you're also burying the plant a bit over time. As it's stripped, and you can see that plant on the right there is the same plant that started quite tall, and all you can see now is actually 2 pairs of leaves and the 3rd pair coming out from under the ground and a further 2 pairs below. So suddenly they shrink. and as you hoe around and you water, that backfills them more and buries it a bit more. And it's risky. Don't overwater. You never want to overwater, or you've got to take it, be a bit gentle at this stage. But to me, that was my method. Have a method, stick to it. I'm burying the plants, I'm going to get them from underground, and I'm going to then try and learn how to control the timing of that and how to force them. Never be indecisive, stick to the plan. and indecision, I keep on saying it, is the devil of dahlia growing. If you look at a plant and you think there's an issue, oh, it's going to be too early, or it's going to throw up too many breaks, or not enough. And if you stand there thinking about it too long, by the time you decide what you're going to do, it's too late to do it. It's not going to be beneficial. So stick to the plan. And the plan is, if you're going to double stop or you're going to grow small plants and do it on a single stop, at the first point that you look at your single stop plants and think there's breaks coming on these already, and I don't want to stop it for another 2 weeks, that's the time you make a decision and probably cut the top out and force those breaks to come strong. So when you go to do it at the right time, you've got power to do it to. Not panic, twiddle your fingers, watch the breaks come, watch the crown of the plant come up and flower. You're just wasting time and energy to solve that problem. So be decisive and stick to the plan. If you've got a plan, don't veer off it unless there's a really good reason to, because you're never going to know if it's worked or not if you haven't stuck to it. That's me, that's the plan. I was going to double stop, so I've double stopped. You know, the plant gets stopped early and stopping power with a good root system, and it's not, that's just part of the process, it's the plan. Same with the giants. That's happens to be a plant of Bonaventure that was planted exactly the same as the Hamari Gold. You can see the growth it's then put on, and we're probably only about the third week of June here. So we made a lot of growth in a very short period of time, but there's probably 6 inches of stem and leaf joints under the ground still. You can see a big cluster of chicken pellets on the top of the ground, as well as a top dress later that went on. And how are we going to make sure they come out from under the ground? Well, we cut the top off and we take out every single leaf joint bud in those joints. So there's only one place it can grow, and that's the ones that are underneath. And really, it's forcing an issue, and you've got to be pretty brave when you do it. I did on some of the later flowering varieties leave that bottom 2 shoots in. And at the point that I could start seeing tips coming out from underground, I then took them off. But they would have probably be too early. So you've got to then at some point decide if it's not growing from underground, whether you double stop those 2 shoots to get your timing right and get your 3 or 4 from those. But earlier flowering varieties, I think you can be brave, strip every shoot that's above ground out. They can only come from the 6 potential shoots from underground. And it did work, as far as trying to get a powerful plant around about the right time. Yeah, I got that one ticked. It was getting them without problems later. So that's a block of Alvis Supreme. We're only probably early July. And then if you look on the plant on the right, the actual original plant stem isn't there anymore. The bit that was planted and sticking out the ground is gone, because once the shoots from underground get going, it's a bit like having suckers on a rose. They take all the energy out of the main plant, and it withered around, so I just chopped it off. And those 3 shoots are the flowering shoots coming out from underneath the soil level. Mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned. And the whole plot was like that. I've just got to tweak the timing. I started a little bit early, and I'll start probably a week, 10 days later now. I've got confidence that they will come. That's the same plant of Hamari Gold that we saw planting earlier in the day, and you can see the shoots, and they're all from underground. And that shoot on the right is, again, making a decision. It's too big, it's going to be too early, it's coming out from under, but there are 6 shoots coming out from under there. So pull the biggest one, and you have to pull them because they're underground, and you can see the root nodules on that stem that are starting to form. And that's the whole point in my head: get them underground to grow their own root system, more energy up to the flower. And I'm trying to get big, full-bodied giants, but don't be afraid to pull it out. And if I had to go to them with a knife and cut them down, I will do. But you're doing it from a powerful beginning. Strong of mind and heavy of feed. I do feed heavy, and when I say heavy, probably most plants, including miniatures, will get about 1 gallon of liquid feed per plant per week, which is a lot. And I don't advocate it. It works for me with what I do and how I do it. I counteract that by trying to grow or flower as many flowers on a plant as I possibly can to maintain them within the ring size. So where someone might grow candy 7 up, I'll probably grow candy 8 or 9 up. And I'm going to get extra flowers. I think it adds to refinement by having more flowers on the plant. But you're not going to do that without counteracting the number of shoots with extra grub. And I probably overdo it, and most of it is probably wasted. But for me, it works. I feed regularly, feed well, add numbers. So Mary's Germander for me would be probably 16 to 18 flowers to the plant, not 12 or 13 or 14. And I think it adds substance in the bloom, refinement in the flower, more choice, and good colour, because feed has all the trace elements to aid colour. And that's my principle. But again, don't grow something 2 more up than someone else without counteracting what you're doing and making it part of your plan. Strong of mind is we're terrible. We're the worst people. All year you look at lovely plants, great, I'm going to win everything. They're fantastic, they're phenomenal. The buds come, you get excited, the first few petals flick back and you get even more excited. And at some point, a point that they're normally about half open, you start seeing faults. And you go, oh, they're rubbish, that's it, it's all over. I've wasted the season, they're terrible, I'm not going to win anything. Then they're about 3/4 open and you think, oh, well, there's 1 or 2. And then just before cutting, you look at, and you only ever see your bad flowers, you never see the good ones. And then you think, oh, that's no point. What's the point of going up there in the morning and cutting flowers? Are rubbish. And then you go there and you start cutting flowers and you think, oh, well, that one's not too bad. Well, that one's all right. Oh, they're not so bad. Oh, I might as well take them to the show. And then you get to the show and you realise everyone else is in exactly the same boat as you. You put your best flowers on the bench and you compete. And if you win, you win. If you don't, you don't. But we all go through the same roller coaster of doubting our own quality of flowers, whether they're going to be right, on time, good enough. But stick with it. You've had a plan, stay with it. Show your best flowers. That sounds like common sense, doesn't it? But it is. And how do you show your best flowers? You spend time with them. You don't just go there, rush 5 minutes before you need to leave, chop some flowers off the plant, throw them in the bucket and turn up at the show. You spend some time the day before cutting, you put the canes on the stems, you select the best ones that you can see at the time. You give yourself as much time and opportunity to make the best job of the flowers you've grown come showtime, because it's a very finite window when you get to the show to when the judges want to come along and judge your flowers. So give yourself the best opportunity to make the best of what you've got. Don't take hundreds of flowers to the show that you're never going to use. Try and sort them out at home. If you've got that many, well done. So take what you're likely to use and a few spares. I've been the worst for it. I'm the idiot that took 500 poms to a national show to sort them all out and stage them. It worked, but it was a mind bender. And I don't do that now. I will sort them at home first when I've got time and save the time at the show. And also, for me, I'm probably slightly different, definitely different to Ian. We know that. But I don't grow for any one class normally, other than now at the moment with the Giants. I've always grown for a collection of classes. So it would be the Terry Clark, the Arthur Griffiths, and when the Wisley Challenge come along. And you can do that, all 3 classes from about 5 or 6 varieties. So I quite grow a number of plants of those main varieties. And I won't decide what I'm going to enter until I get to the show. And if I think I'm going to stage Terry Clark with 1.5 week vases, I could put up a really good Arthur Griffiths without any weak vases. I'll go down and I'll stage the Arthur Griffiths, and that'll be my class. If I don't think I've got an Arthur Griffiths because there's going to be, the poms aren't quite up to scratch, but I've got 5 really good vases, I'll stick them in the Wisley Challenge. All of those are probably the highest number of vase classes in the show and are competitive classes. And my mindset is I want to show my best flowers to make the best job of them in the best way I can. And it doesn't matter what class it is. I'd like to think that I can have a crack to try and get the best exhibit and show. And I think I worked out over the last 8 national shows, I've won the Crane Cup for the best exhibit 3 times out of 8 years from 3 different exhibits. There's been a Terry Clark, an Arthur Griffiths and a Wisley Challenge. And it's just about trying to show your best flowers to give you the best chance on the day for a win. I think if you've never staged a Terry Clark, or if you've never staged an Arthur Griffiths and you've grown for it, the first time you put it, you get in there and you stage it. Once you sort of get used to that, then perhaps, you know, I try and keep some options open to put the best things on the bench. I got a lot of stick for this, putting up 5 yellow vases of 2 varieties. You know, yeah, it's boring as hell, but it got the best exhibit and show. So who cares what colour they are, and who cares how boring it is? That's the best exhibit and show, and there are 5 very good vases. The Arthur Griffiths, that wasn't the one I won their best exhibit with, but it's 6 vases of quality sections. And the Terry Clark, we're not that good at semi-cactus down our neck of the woods, heavy soils, hot weather, but we can grow a deck and we can grow a ball. And if I thought about it and swapped the Challenger for Valentine, and that would have been an all deck and ball entry. where when you look at the exhibits from the north, they're probably a majority cactus entry. They're vase and medium semis, large semis, small cact, and probably a miniature deck or a small deck in there as well. And that's about showing your best flowers, giving yourself the best chance to get the entry up and for the judge not to be able to take many points off you. That's all it's about, is putting a vase up that the judge is going to work hard to take points off of. And POMs is a relatively new thing, but it's something that I always thought, if they're good enough, I've got the experience of growing POMs from the past. If they're good enough, they're hard to take points off, especially when there's only 5 in the vase. It's a little bit easier to take points off a 9 now, but use these opportunities to your advantage, really. And that's all I'd say, is give yourself the best chance to win. And all of this end product is part of the plan that we started at the beginning. And the processes that we stick with. And as much as you'll learn a lot from the next talk on growing and all the talks you've seen on growing, I think the mindset and the ability, the application of those techniques is probably as important as what the techniques are. I never had faith with medium semis. All that year I had loads of candy, never used them. Thought, oh no, I can't put them against the moonlight, you know, they're going to get knocked. And then I took them up to the Scottish National. I have to admit, I did have a vase of die-ins to sit there in their place, but as soon as they crossed the border from England to Scotland, they suddenly grew spots and went nice and brown, spotty at the back, and I couldn't use them. So I put in the medium semis as a replacement. Found out that I could grow candy, because that went on and got the best vase and mediums in show. But it's just that's the mindset again. You get yourself, be strong in mind, believe in what you've grown. If you can't find much fault in them, nor can the judge. So I'll come out of that and we'll go up to the frozen north and run through his growing methods. I've seen it and it's great, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it. We stop the share there. And then we're going to go, here we go, bear with me. I can hear the computer whirring, so it should yeah, in a moment. That's me again. Right, can we see that?
No.
Yeah.
No,
No.
we're just seeing the listing again.
Stop share. I never had this problem.
Oh, well.
What about now?
Yeah, that'll do.
Okay.
Just whip through them, David.
I'll mute myself. You just say okay.
I'll give you the I'll give you the thumbs up or whatever. Yeah. Hello? Can you hear me, Mother? No. Hello?
We can hear you, Ian.
All right.
Hi, Ian.
Good evening, guys.
Evening, sir.
I totally agree with what David's saying. You've got to be really bloody minded about what you want to win and put yourself out. I do myself, I think, a bit of, I grow too many varieties, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I'll just go through basically what I try and do to get them in the right condition at the right time, and go through the different methods that I try to employ to get a decent vase on the table, really. So, okay, David, move on. David, move on. Thank you. So, I've always advocated taking small cuttings. So you can see there on the left-hand side, we've got, and the tape measure is just showing you the size of cutting I tend to take. And at this time of the year, I was just telling David earlier, I'm rooting inside of 8 to 12 days easily. So this is how it's coming out of the propagator. So okay then. So this is a timeline that I'm looking to plant out the first week in June. So I'm taking cuttings anything from mid-April for my show plants, and then if they're later than that, that's fine. Even if they're only rooted and I'm planting them out in June out of a 7 centimetre pot, I'm happy with that. I'm also happy with planting them out of a 9 centimetre pot. And you'll see why I can do that. And I try and grow my plants straight up. I tend to not mess about with them too much, but try to grow them straight up. You get a little bit more petal in them. You can then play about with the petals then as they're developing. And I just feel you get a fuller flower. But if you're feeding like David does, if you're feeding, cutting them back and feeding, he's getting the same thing, but using the feed to get that. Because he's growing more on a plant, he's getting the results. And he is getting the results, and you can't knock that. So, okay then, please. Okay, so there you are. The 7 centimetre pots on the right hand side. That's a kiwi, and then the one on the right hand side. That's a bit big, actually. They're too big, really, for what I like to plant out, and that's Challenger, and those are in 9 centimetre pots. Okay then. What I try and do, of course, is keep them nice and soft and nice and green. Now, this was a few years ago, and what I tend to do is I get them all out and get them all in trays ready, and then and I dip them in a brew, a magic brew of a systemic insecticide, a fungicide, and I stick my hand in that with a big glove on, with a gauntlet on. And I'll put the plants in backwards. So I'll put the pot in first, and I'll go down and up and bring it out, the moisture out of the liquid, sorry. So as it's coating the backs of the leaves and getting a good dousing. In my mind, then they're covered then for 6 weeks, no problem at all. Okay, so this is what the conditions I'm looking at, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm getting on average. How much I'm similar. Yeah, my average sunshine, if you will, as opposed to David's. David, you're looking at possibly. Did you look, David, or not? What you was with? No, I'll tell you anyway. So I'm looking at an average rainfall for me at 67 millimetres of rainfall, as opposed to 50 millimetres with David, and possibly less. And then the temperatures we're looking at, well, David's temperatures are between 22, average temperatures these are, average temperatures, between 22 and 23. Now, I know for a fact that, you know, it's a lot more than that. You know, I mean, it's no wonder that the blooms open very quickly, and they seem to be short of petal sometimes in the south, whereas we have a slower development in our area. It's cooler with more rain, and they tend to develop more. So I'm looking at 180 hours of sunlight per month, whereas David's looking at 200 hours. Now, it's possibly a little bit more than that, but these are the average temperatures we're talking about. There's years where, I mean, we've had it 30 odd degrees most days in July, similar to what they do in the south. So move on, David, please. So there we are, the big Bertha. So I've got this the rotinator. It doesn't just go down about 8 to 9 inches. It's quite deep, and it's a beautiful. I mean, you can look at you can see the soil there, blessed with some really good soil. So it's all rotinated over like that. Go on, lady. and I put this one on. I think this is the one I put on for. Oh no, this is a different one. So I like to really put all my base dressing into the ground before I start, and then rely on that and the way the plants are developing whilst they're taking that feed up, and then I'll decide when I'll start to feed. Okay, so we've got natural chalk, which is a fairly fast-acting nitrogen, and then you've got fish blood and bone, or if you can afford it, the Q4. Calcified seaweed, that's a real. I feel that's a good conditioner for the ground, and you're not going to overdose with that. But you can see I don't put an awful lot of the fertilizer on there. That's raked in 7-10 days before planting, if possible, and then every couple of years I put some spent mushroom compost on. Now, this is not without. I will always try and do a soil test, because I think that's so important. You know, you get pH right here. We can move on, please. Yeah. So your pH, I'm looking at, on average, my ground is probably 6.8 to 7, usually, but it has in the past been as low as maybe 5.5. Now, if you start growing on a ground that's 5.5, you're not going to have all those nutrients available for the plant to take up. So you've got to do a soil test or a pH test, a conductivity test, to see if the soil's in the right condition before we start to plant the plant out and start feeding. Okay, David? So this was, I don't know, I grow through Formicell or Mypex, and there's no, you can't really see the soil on my plot. Now, this is after everything's been rotivated, all the fertilizers in there, and then I believe somebody's going to start growing through this year. We'll see, because David had a few problems with the straw, and if you've got problems with straw, and it's just ruins your season, really. So if there's any insecticide or anything like that that's in the straw, you've got a big problem. But you know, in the frozen north, I covered with this Mypex. We cut the holes with the blowtorch. Now I see some people using a blowtorch, and they cut a hole in the Mypex rather than a cross. And by cutting a cross in it, what happens when you plant through that, the flaps go back towards the plant, and we don't get an awful lot of weed growing. So there's very, very little. I'm not Father Christmas. I don't want to be going around with a hoe going ho 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 ho. Every time you turn over some soil, you've got some seeds there that are going to be producing your weeds again. So I prefer not to do that. People worry about, is it going to be warm? Is it too hot for the plant? Believe me, if you keep that your ground moist under that Mypex, it's 5 or 6 degrees cooler than it is in the open ground. You know, I've tested it on open ground, and it does work. I promise you. If you put your hand under the Mypex, it's reasonably cool if you keep it moist. Okay, David, please. So there we are. I have a 54-foot tunnel. I can grow 192 plants in there. So again, all gets the same base dressing basically. So all raked in, and then as you can see, it's covered down with the Formicell ready. And hopefully that's maybe a fortnight, or maybe a week, a fortnight before I start to plant. Okay. Thank you. So then, planting out between the reason I plant out at this time is because I get half term, so I'm able to plant out pretty basically in one day I can plant 600 in one day, no problem, because I'm growing out of small pots. Whereas David, for instance, if he planted 600, he may not get them in the day. It may take 2 or 3 days. That's not a problem, you know. It's all sorts of courses. It's what you want to do. I have slow development up in the north, so I choose or made the decision. Again, this decision thing is that we're putting small plants in, and those small plants will get hold of that feed. And believe me, by the end of June, we've got quite a bushy plant. I tend not to. I put them in. This is the majority of the plants I put in, and I'll stop them probably the 3rd week in June. The Challenger and certainly the Moonlights, I don't stop the Moonlights until it's got a crown bud on it, so it may have a little bit of colour in the bud. And what I'll do with that is I'll stop those at the end of the 1st week in July. And if I've got it right, I've got the buds that'll develop and give us a blooming 55 days, 60 days. You know, well, sorry, from a bud, in a little blip in the leaf axil, that'll develop into a full bloom about 60 days. Okay, David, move on, please. All right, keep going. Yeah. So Challenger then. So Challenger, that's a 7 centimetre pot. And what I tend to do with that, similar to what you heard earlier, I take the bottom leaves off, 2-3 pair of leaves. These are what I call the ones at the bottom on the left. I tend to call those the seed leaves. I know they're not seed leaves, but the tiny leaves. I take those off, and the next one's up. And then you can see a little shoot on that 3rd image in, and I'll plant them. And I'll plant them up to the next pair of leaves. Okay, then move on. Now you can bury them as low as you want, but some of those shoots don't want to be shoots. Some will want to be roots. So you know, it's like if you're not careful, if you make that decision, oh, I'm going to plant them like that and take the top out, there's nowhere to go. I grow my Challenger 5 up, so I want to try and get as many as I can force from below. Yes, because those definitely make the best flowers, the best blooms. They will provide their own. They'll get a little root system of their own, and then you'll get a cracking bloom. So those have been in there possibly 2 weeks there. Okay, thank you, David. So this is what I do with Challenger. So the last day in June, or the 1st day in July, I chop them down like that to 2 pair of leaves. And by 12 days later, it's the same plant, 12 days later, you've got your shoots. So it does work, you know. I count then when we're back to the next image. We've got 5 breaks, and I'll take those down to 5 breaks. But also, I might decide that, and this is about, again, like David said, it's about making that decision of when you're going to do something. So we get the old penknife out, or the blade, and we'll cut them back. And then these we're looking at, thanks David. This we're looking at, go on David. Thank you. So if we're looking, sorry, I was getting a bit confused with the other information about the Moonlight. So this is the Moonlight. We've taken the top out. I've decided that I'm going to grow them on a stop this time, some on a stop, some straight up, and then we can compare the difference. So I've taken those out, and I've just let them develop, the breaks develop. So I might have stopped those the 3rd week in June. We'll let the breaks develop and then cut them out. And if you look at the image on the right-hand side, you can see a tiny, tiny little blip of a shoot in the leaf axils. So I'm growing cream Moonlight or Eastwood Moonlight at 6 and 7 up. So as then, Okay, David. So I'd say the plant, that's out of one plant. So we've got reasonable breaks there for a moonlight, but they're never the strongest of shoots. And that, run on then. So yeah, run on. So here, rather than, as I say, I would rather grow all my blooms, if I can hold them back straight up. Now, this is a method that Mr. David Spencer advocates a lot of, is that it's no good having a bloom before the show. It's no problem at all. For if you get the hang of this method, it's not a problem. Because if we look at the image on the left-hand side, you'll see that you've got your terminal buds, you've got your buds in there. Now, if that's going to bloom for me, probably in the south, probably 23 days. For me, that's going to be 25, 26 days. But I'm not going to show in 26 days. I've got to show in 30 days. So what I tend to do is I'll take that bud out the top and I'll let another shoot develop. But if it's way in advance, you make that decision. You then take or promote a shoot that's lower down the stem. So the right-hand image now is showing us that I've taken chopped the stem back, and I've allowed one shoot to develop. But if you notice, I've taken all the shoots off below that. So that becomes your flowering lateral. Now, the difference in the timing between the left-hand plant and the right-hand plant will probably be 3.5 weeks. Okay, so that's the way we can make sure on a run-on method. I don't believe that this is challenging. Sorry, this is a kiwi, and it doesn't work with kiwis chopping them right back. But with a run-on, it tends to be okay. Okay, David. So I don't feed for the first month. I'm a lot lighter with the feeds than down south. I rely on the feed in the ground, but I do try to give most things. I say that, but I don't feed anything to my miniatures. Okay, but I do give every plant 2 pints of feed, maybe 10 days to every 10 days, every 12 days, something like that. So I'm only looking at a maximum I can get into them is probably 3 feeds. I very much like to look at the plants. I very much like to think to myself, well, I don't want to put it through a feeder, through a hose. I'd rather water with a watering can so I can see every plant. I think if you stand at the end of the row and spray, then it's not really what the idea is. The idea is you want to treat every plant as an individual and try and get them growing all the same, so we have a good cut at the, hopefully, a reasonable cut at the end of the day. I do use some a seaweed feed, a little bit of Epsom salt in there, good for colour. The other thing I do put on, and it's not on that sheet there, is sulphate of iron. I use some iron in there as well for colour. And I'll spray that on the plants and I'll spray it under the leaves. And there's as much goodness or feed goes through the leaves than it will do through the roots. So if you're feeding, you've only got a few plants, and you want to feed with the rows, you feed with the rows and feed it over the plants as well. Okay. No phosphates if possible. So I try to use a Vitex feed, but definitely no potash on my kiwis. When you start putting kiwis, you start putting potash on kiwis, then you're getting those green centres, they don't close up, you get a pinhole centre, and before you know it, you've lost 2 or 3 points on the bench. We don't want to do that. And then, anyway, move on, Dave, please. So that's a month on. The plants in the foreground, they were moonlights. As you can see, big bushy plants. We might be looking at those, and if we're you know, we're early July there, and we're thinking to ourselves, oh, you know, 56 days have I got a show, 60 days have I got a show. If you haven't, then you go in there and you have a look at it and you decide, do I let them grow and do them on a run-on? Because in the frozen north again, I can tend to run a moonlight on, and I get a decent bloom. I get a good bloom. The things that I've got a problem with is the likes of moonlights, although they're very, very good. If we're not careful, if we get a mist over for a couple of days before we start to show, then they're all spotty. Same with the Dianes. So again, you've got to get that. You think to yourself, well, I've got to grow something else as well. So that's why I tend to grow quite a few varieties, because my main ones might not be there. So I've got to then rely on another variety. Okay, yeah, so I would say to David, I much prefer to grow with the canes around. So we put 3 canes in inverted TP and then a tie around them. I'm a bit lazy in the fact that I try and get away with just 1 tie. In a polytunnel, it's all right. No problem at all. Okay, then press it again. There we go. So there are your 3 canes there. And what this is a Diane. What I tend to do with the Dianes is grow 6, 7 up. And what I had been doing is taking the bottom leaves out. They've done the business. The lower ones might start to yellow a little bit, so they're doing no good. Take them off. But the idea is you get a little bit of air movement through them. So as it reduces the fact, you know, less chance of getting a fungicide attack or whatever. Keep everything clean. No weeds if we can help it, and hopefully in 60 days we've got some good blooms. Okay, then carry on. Yeah, I did have a little spell for one season of growing through nets. And I couldn't believe the difference between those 2 pictures, and it's only 10 days apart. Now I like to get under my plants and I like to get into my plants, and I can't really get into the middle of those plants through a net. So I sacked that idea and I've gone back to the 3 canes. You know, I mean, sometimes stick with what you know. Stick with what works for you. That's the thing, right? Okay, good. Yeah, so we're looking a little bit of tinge of colour there. They're going to be well past the show, though, so they were for maybe just before, maybe Southport Flower Show, which is a little bit before the bank holiday weekend. I always like to get a few flowers off my plants before I start cutting for the national and that. So, okay. So we're looking at the early August now. We're into getting the back end of August, and the difference is, you know, what's that? 21 there. 9, 10, 11, 12 days, 13 days. So from a petal starting to flick to a full bloom, you're only looking about 12 days. Probably in the south, I don't know what that would be, but you probably find in the south, you're probably looking at 10 days. You know, but David will correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, David. Okay.
I'll just correct you. If that's moonlight flicking like that, it would be 7 days to full flower.
Yeah. Okay, move on. Okay, so challenger, I grow a reasonable challenger. Now I'm growing these straight up, as I say. I don't believe, unless you're putting a very, very big plant in, like David does, and feeding them really well, I do not believe you can cut them back. You know, I've even grown them on a side bud. You know, and I'd be quite happy to go in there and cut half a dozen blooms. You know, it tends not, I don't know why, but it tends not to spot for me. They will do if it's really bad, the weather, but I'm quite happy. They're only maximum 4 foot tall. Now, what I tend to do when a lateral's coming up, I will tend to leave the side shoots on them. And I'll leave the side shoots, and sometimes the side shoots are 2 inches long before I remove them. What I'm trying to alleviate is the fact that sometimes when you see a full bloom Challenger, it tends to be a bit bearded, a bit too much petal in it. Also, not only that, it becomes a little bit coarse if you're not careful. If you're too keen taking everything off a plant, and you're feeding it as well, and you're giving it loads of water's a good thing, but if you're feeding it as well, then you tend to get a coarse-looking bloom. If you leave some of the bits and the rubbish on it and take them off slowly, it's a slightly slower development, and in my opinion, you get a better formed flower, without doubt. Now, if you're growing blooms that you think, oh, those first few blooms are a bit bearded, you know, well, what can I do about that? I've already set this. I've already set the stage for getting a decent bloom. Well, what you can do, if you look at the left-hand side, you've got these blooms developing, starting to develop. What you can do is take out a couple of rows of petals. So you pull them out, and what that does then is that will allow them to develop nicely and go round, and they'll end up with a nice round bloom, and then hopefully not bearded, because you know it doesn't look right when the petals are hanging down. Okay, David. So this was 2011. This is after I won the Terry Clark, and that was 3 days after the Terry Clark win. As David commented to me, because I showed him this last night, it looks like you don't grow as many varieties then, but I did. I still grew the varieties. But so in the first 2 beds here, we had a bed of trailing kiwi and 2 beds of Gloria then. So the usual suspects I try to grow, but I also try and have that option, as Dave says. You've got to have your option, a plan B, just in case plan A is not going to plan. Okay, thank you. So there we are. You go on the morning and you think to yourself, my God, I'm going to have a good cut here. And then you get a bit closer inspection and your kiwis might not be up to scratch, and you're thinking everything's rubbish. Absolutely everything's rubbish. You've got to go beyond that, and you've got to cut them, and you know, everybody else is having a problem as well. Somebody will be there with the blooms. You might not have the best blooms, but you might have the best average blooms. And believe me, you can win the Terry Clark, which is my ultimate aim, with average blooms. Right, David? So there we go. Kiwi Gloria, I'll grow it 9 up, no problem at all. Straight up, again, very, very sit on your hands. Don't start taking the tips out the plant. Reasonably small bloom, reasonably small plant going in the ground. I don't stop it until the 3rd week in June. And after the third week in June, then we'll let it develop and see what goes on. If I'm getting buds before 25 days before a show, before that, then I'll just run them on. Take a side shoot, run it on a side bud, etc. And it tends not to make much difference, to be honest, to the blooms. You pick a reasonable amount out of that lot. So that's a row of 26. In the main, I only grow 26 plants of trelling. That year when I won the Terry Clark on the 2011, I grew 2 rows. So that was what, 56, 52 blooms. Okay, then. So that's definitely one of my bankers. Definitely one of my bankers, you know. Would be Challenger, then this one. You know, I mean, you'd be hard pushed to fault that bloom on the right hand side, and I think we'd all want 5 of those in the vase, you know. So yeah, it'll go to the size, no problem. I try not to grow to the ring, but in water it's surprising how the things grow. Next one, please. Again, I'll grow a miniature. This one seems to grow all right for me, so I'll grow a miniature. This is Barbara in the Moor. Plenty of best in shows with that one. Okay, so that's a miniature deck. And then we've got the Challenger. Now, the reason I put this photograph in is I try and, if you feed potash to Challenger, you'll get this lilac haze on it or pink haze on it. It's not a fault. I think it looks quite nice, you know. But if you don't feed them with potash, and I tend not to have problems with stems, you know, with them being whippy and soft. So, you know, if you don't put potash on them, they tend to be a little bit whiter. Now, over the past 3 or 4 years, I've tended to ease off on the feed. And certainly last year, when it was more of an experimental year, I tended not to give them. I gave my plants last year 1 nitrogen feed and 1 potash feed. And to be honest with you, I didn't see an awful lot of difference in the plants or the blooms. And the tubers were superb. And they kept very well. So, you know, there's food for thought there. Is, do we need to put this amount of liquid feed on them? Okay, now. Deborah's kiwi. I put a few plants in the polytunnel just to try them. I think they're better just under a normal cover, personally. But, you know, I mean, you'd be happy with that. The only fault with that, it can be a little bit streaky. Just like Mary's Jomanda can be streaky, you know. But it's there. It's a lovely, lovely form thing. It's a lot stronger plant than its mother, Kiwi Gloria. But it's certainly not bad, not bad. I wouldn't mind putting that in if my Gloria wasn't up to it. I'd put Deborah's Kiwi in. And again, I won the Terry Clark with Deborah's Kiwi in as well. Okay, then. And then if you can't grow the Dianes and you want to back up small deck, then I put this one in. And I'll be honest, the reason I put this one in is because it was an offer from my great late friend Donald, and it did quite well. The problem is with it, it tends to lose its form when it's been in the water a long time. You know? So again, that would be one that you need to cut and take down this. It's about knowing your varieties. As you can see there, they've got the pea sticks on, and I tend to use masking tape. So that's probably the day before the show, and we put the masking tape on with a pea stick, and then you're actually cutting the sticks, as they say, rather than the flowers. You know, you're cutting, and you know that one must be right because it's got a stick on it. And you cut all them, and then you cut what else there is. But usually there's no point in looking again because you've already decided the day before which are the right ones. Okay, then. And, you know, I'd be happy with 5 of them in a vase. It might not be Diane, but, you know, if it's 2 points behind David's Diane, my Kiwis are 3 points in front of his Oakwood Goldcrest, which is a cracking variety again. Okay, thank you. Again, you can move on. So we're then cutting for a show. Now, why did I stop growing that variety on the right-hand side? I don't know, because that was another good variety. Again, not a Diane, but that was Stephanie, Rosendale Stephanie, small deck, grow that 8 up, pretty good brown bloom. Again, though, it's a backup. It was a backup to my Diane, you know. So we cut those, right, David? And you've got to be careful ringing blooms. When you ring a bloom in the evening, on the right-hand side, they look massive. When you ring them in the morning, you'll find that they may go through the ring. If they don't, you've got to discard it. You know, it breaks your heart. You know, it's no point in taking blooms to a show if the brushing ring on your plot. They're going to get bigger. They're not going to get smaller. Yeah, but when you are measuring and using your rings in the evening, when you're at the show and you ring, you've got to remember that when a cactus is in a vase and you've rung it at night, it may not go through the ring. But first thing in the morning when they wake up, they will go through the ring. If you know, but you still got to ring them. Okay then. And then I tend to use, I've used buckets, I've used, and I'm not sponsored by the dairy, by the way, but I've got the crates, we've got a metal frame over that, and then does anybody know, David, do you know what the variety is on the left-hand side? Any idea? So we'll tape the stick using masking tape to the bloom.
Primrose Hill?
No, it's not actually. It was actually it was actually Hero. Rosendale Hero. And the same in the crate, they're all Rosendale Hero. And it looked like Primrose Diane. You know? But it was Baldale, just like I suppose a Ruskins are. So we put them in the crates. They look like they're close together, but they're not. There's a good 2 inches, 2.5 inches between each bloom. And those are secured then with the masking tape. And then other people use the, I think that was one of Graham's contraptions there on the right-hand side, Graham McFarlane. Okay then. Again, I bought some plastic sticks. So I'm just showing you on the Rosendale Jane there, is I've got some white plastic sticks, and they were tending not to, a bit cleaner, and also not, sometimes you're not careful with the pea stick, if the cheap ones that you're buying and that, all the colour comes off them. So I think that's quite a nice variety and all. That was, believe it or not, one of that seedling was out of Rosendale Lewis. The one that I won my first Terry Clark with that David thought was good, and he grew it on very effectively and won with it, you know, and it's a good variety. It tends to be a little bit bigger petal, that one, but I think, you know, with 5 in a vase, it's got some reasonable refinement on it. You do well, you do really well with that. So that's Rosendale, Skelmersdale Jane, which I would tend to, again, have that in my back pocket as well as an option to use. Thank you. Oh, we might look at this all night, David, I don't know. Yeah, that's lovely. Right, so there we've got the crates of the kiwis, a crate of Deborah's kiwi on the right, and a crate of Kiwi Glory on the left. Now, the reason I've put this in, I tend to cut my blooms, certainly with kiwi, I'll cut them about 36, maybe 48 hours before the show. That's for me, okay? It frees them up, it allows them to have a good drink, and we get cracking form. You know, I mean, you'd be delighted to put 5 of those up out of each crate, no problem, and be pleased with them. Next one, please, David. So I put them in, and I put one of these oscillating fans on them, and I play some music to them and leave the lights up. And I go in and see if they're all right before I go to bed. And the air movement that is there to make sure they're not starting to damp off. Now, I hear people say to me, I load my car up the night before the show. Then I go to bed and get up and drive down to Wisley. And then you're wondering why all the balloons are falling apart and they're all spotty. You've got to give them every chance. You know, they're my little babies. I want to be looking after them. I've spent 9 months looking after them. I really want to do them justice. Okay, David? And if I could grow the moonlights like that, I'd be delighted. Now, if I can get them like that without spotting, I'd be over the moon. So they were Eastwood moonlight, I think with some white or cream moonlight in the back. I'm having another go at the white moonlight this year, so if it pays off, it does. If not, I'm on with another medium semi-cactus that I've got. So we'll see. Thank you. So who said a bloke can't pack? Eh? So this is one visit down to Birmingham or the Midlands, and Graham and myself went down there, Graham McFarlane, and I tried my best to damage all his balloons, but it didn't work. He beat me that day, actually. So, okay, next one. So this is our national. Take a tip, guys. Oh, don't stop it. That was my first win, I suppose, at Harrigan. That was the Kiwi again. So quite pleased with that. Yeah, next one, please. That's good. And then you've got these lovely judges who, you know, hopefully they're all reading the schedule. Hopefully they all know the rules and they're not judging to their own agenda. You know, and we're in their hands to a certain extent, aren't you? Next one, please. All I'd say is that when you go to the National, just concentrate on your own balloons. Don't worry about anybody else's exhibits. Just do your own. So you can make a good entry out of your balloons if they're reasonable. If you start looking at everybody else's stuff, you think to yourself, ooh, not quite the same as Gillam's. Ooh, Mr. Spencer's got some cracking poms down there. You know, don't look at them. Just do your own thing, stage them up, vase them up, get them on the bench. They've got yours to beat then. You know, that's not being big-headed. That's the case of it's on the bench, they've got them to beat, and that's it. You can't do anything else. You can't go and make some more balloons. But what you can do is give them time and take your time staging. Okay? So again, ring size in the evening, they look massive. In the morning, you probably find they're all right. If not, don't put it in. It's not worth losing your entry or get a 0-pointed vase, and then you've no chance then at the big prize. Next one, please. So we've now got our reigning champion in the middle there, Steve Burns, and then our Tracy on left-hand side, and then myself. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that get yourself into some space that you're not minded with everybody, and get your vases, prep them up right, get all your vases you need. Yeah, we can't use Oasis now, but whatever you're using, and we'll put that in. That's at Wisley, we can't use Oasis, we can do it Arrogance next time. And then take your time, choose it. You might have already chosen what you think are going to be your 3 Challenger, or your 3 Moonlights, or your 5 Oakwood. You might have already checked them at home, but they change. You might have clipped you might have creased one of the petals. You might have a different development as they sat in the water. So you take yourself a couple of spares, but do not take about 50 or 60 Dianes, or 50 or 60 Moonlights. I remember a very, very, very good Terry Clark winner who won it 4 times. He couldn't sort his balloons out simply because he'd taken too many to the show. You know, take what you can handle, take what you can sort out. Okay, David? And that's what we're after. We're after lovely, well-balanced exhibit. Yeah, and I'd see, I do grow, I sometimes grow Mary's Demander. So there's Mary's Demander. One of my favourite miniatures is Barbary Surprise, and then Kiwi Gloria, and then Canori Challenger. Canori Challenger, I grow 5 up. The Kiwi, I grow 9 up. The Surprise, I grow, so I think, 10 up. And the Mary's Demander, even I'm getting 16 up on it, you know. So if you can keep it clean and well, you can keep them clean, no problem. But if you can get them without them being streaky, they're okay. They're a good entry, or a good inclusion, should I say, or Mary's Demander. Next one, please, do. So, you know, again, I'll be gunning for that Mr. Spencer this next time, I think, at Wisley. I want to try and take that one off him, because he tells me he's on his 3rd win with it, so we'll see. But again, you know, I like the miniatures. Barbary Dustcliff there. Marston George, I think, is an absolute cracking variety. It can be grown outside. I would never grow that undercover, because if we grow it undercover, it tends to lose its centre very, very quick. Do you think I should put the light on? I'm going darker and darker. Hold on a minute. I can see me again, mate. Right, so there you are. And I've got Skelmersdale Jane there. And that was 3 years ago, that at Harrogate. So again, when you're doing a multi-vase entry, try and get the blooms all the same size in the various vases, and match the centres up. You know, and if you've got an entry like that, you won't be so far away. Okay, next one. So this is Midland Show best exhibit, and I always think, you know, the best vase in show is sort of I don't know, it's not the thing I go for, but it's nice if you get it, you know. The judges have said that that's the best, and it's great, it's lovely, you know, but I don't think we grow just for a vase, you know, we grow for the exhibit. Next one, please. So this is Danny Baker. He grows them and all, he grows Kiwis as well. And I think everybody would be happy with something like that. You know, I mean, the Oakwoods are fantastic, and I love that variety, but it's not quite the same as that. But it will beat Kiwi. A very, very good vase of Oakwood will beat Kiwi. So again, if I couldn't grow the Kiwis, then I would look at Oakwood. No question about that. But fortunately, I can. And the thing is, what you're doing, you're beating yourself on your allotment or on your greenhouse or wherever you're growing. You're beating yourself on your plot. So what's the point in growing something that you can beat? Yeah, the Kiwis tend not to spot, and so I'll carry on growing them. You know. Next, please. That was my first Terry Clark. But next one. Next one. And the winner is. Yeah. So this was the vase in the middle. I think David fell in love with that vase, and that was Rosendale Lewis. And it was out of, well, it was one of Donald Kershaw's racings. And so, yeah, I can grow the Dianes. So I had the Dianes that weren't, I think they'd actually started to spot in the morning, but there they are. Kiwi Gloria, Cream Moonlight, and then Challenger. I wish that I put that vase back behind the Moonlights properly. Well, there you go. And that day, I came out on top. That was 2008. That was the first win, which I think it was a good entry. One of the exhibitors said to me, "Why have you put your Challenger in 3 vases? Can't be any good." But it's what you feel looks right and what looks balanced. You know, I wouldn't consider putting, I'd have to do if it said on the schedule, but I wouldn't consider growing a medium deck. because they tend not to get the same points as, say, a miniature. A miniature will probably always get better points than a medium deck, unless it's an absolute cracker. You know, I'd rather grow a pom, and I'm not the best pom grower, but I have one the cherry cloud with the poms in. You know, next one, please. This is where probably my poorest entry, the cherry cloud. Kiwi's not that good, but it was good enough to beat Barry Kenyon, and that's all that mattered. And the Suzanne could have been better. The Moonlights were good, and the Neris Trisha were good. But yeah, move on, I think, on that one. And the next one. And the next one. Come on, moving on, David. That's it. So this one was one that a fellow grower said to me, I see you growing for the colour class. Well, fortunately, I did, and I won it. So again, that was Terry Clark. The challenger at the back looks a little bit smaller. Believe me, it wasn't. It was just leaning back a bit. Decent set of Moonlights. Again, I'll always grow them. I'll always grow Challenger. I'll always grow Moonlights, Kiwis, a miniature now, miniature ball, miniature deck, and a pom. I'll also back up my Moonlights with another medium semi, maybe, that I know won't damp, such as White Candy we've got now, you see, so I'll use that. I'd always try to use self-coloured varieties, because self-coloured varieties are easier to match up. Yeah. Now, the Kiwi, they were lovely bars, that. They're tending to go a bit streaky if we're not careful. But, you know, I was quite happy with that. Phil Watson was in second and Steve Burns was in third, so I was quite happy with that. And it was, what, possibly that year, I think there was 12 entries in it. So, not bad. So, it's been, what, 5 years since I won it, so just watch out, guys. Next one, please. So there you go. And the next. That's how it all began. Right? And there you go. And the next. And that, ladies and gentlemen, how vegetarian, isn't it? And the next. That's Charlotte. Thank you very much. If you've enjoyed it, my name's Ian. If you haven't, it's Stuart Cleansing. Thank you.
Fantastic.
What he said?
Right, I'm back in the room as well now. What we'll obviously do questions. I think there's a lot of people on here to do it by voice. So if you look at your screens, at the bottom of your screen, you should have a little chat bubble. If you use that and put your name in it, then we can call you for a question. You can unmute yourself, ask the question, and we'll try and answer. It'll probably be easier than having a bit of a bun fight with everyone. And we can't actually see everyone's hands or anything at any one time to know if you've got your hand up in the air. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a chat box. If you've got a question, pop it in there and we'll put your name in there. We'll call you, unmute, and you can ask your question. If you've got any questions and you can't find a chat button, then unmute yourself and ask a question. Okay, go on, Kat.
Hi guys, you okay?
Yes.
Good to see you both. So obviously from our point of view, we've shown locally, we've been lucky enough to go up to the Nationals, and you guys were brilliant and said, you know, if you're coming, you may as well bring something with you. Something that may have helped us going to our first show would be probably having an idea of which classifications to go for those points. Both of you mentioned about this would get better points than this one. What would you advise anybody going to a show regarding looking for those points?
Any variety, any show variety or look through the lists in the years gone by, any of those are quite capable of still winning. Would you agree, David?
Yeah.
You still, we tend to sort of go for the new kids on the block if we can. But I've got to say, at the end of the day, we're still using Challenger. We're still using Moonlights. Moonlights are 40 odd years old. Challenger was 76, was it? Something like that when it came out. And that sort of, was it 76?
Moonlight,
like that. But I'd be inclined to keep to the smaller stuff, me, personally. I'd be inclined to be looking at miniature ball, miniature decks, maybe ponds, that sort of thing. You've a lot of bloom on a pond plant and a reasonable amount of bloom on a miniature. So I tend to be looking at that, and maybe a nice, easy one to grow, because they're all easy to grow. They're difficult to get right. That's the thing, but Oakwood is really a reasonable variety to grow. But I wouldn't suggest down in Cornwall you start growing kiwis and take it to a national. They look great on the plant. You then put it at the side of a vase of John Fraser's, Frankie Fraser's, and you think to yourself, back to the drawing board.
I think look in the winter bulletin where you've got the show analysis, and any of those top 20 varieties is a damn good place to start. And find the best growers in your area and find out what they're growing.
Yeah.
Because, they would have learnt from a lot of mistakes. I try, although we're all like kids in sweet shops, I try to avoid anything new.
I don't.
I always go backwards to go, well, this was good for a few years. Why isn't it now? And quite often it's just because a new kid on the block comes along and go, oh, well, this is going to be better. And you grow it and the stock buy and it's not better, but then you move on to the next better one.
Yeah. Well, when we went to our first show, as you both know, Shay, my boy, did a reasonably well at the show, and he won Best in Vase with quite an old dahlia, which was Karen Glen. So I think both of you advised us at the time, anything grown well can achieve the results. So my advice, I'm going to finish in a moment, but my advice to anybody out there, we're not experienced growers like you guys and some of the others that are here tonight, but we have had a go, we have had results. And from me, very quickly, my advice to everybody is, like you say, have a plan, work towards your goal. You can do it, but don't panic. If you see others doing other things, they're doing their game. You just run your own game. So above all, enjoy your dahlias, but we can do it. My son was 5 when he started. He's only 12 now. He's been to the nationals. He's got a couple of cards. So if we can do it, any of you guys can do it. And that's me out. Thanks, guys.
So
just to remember is don't be frightened of asking people, approaching people and ask them. All the dahlia guys will help you. Just because it's David Spencer, just because it's Dave Gillam, they'll all help you. Every one of them will help you and find time for you.
Absolutely. Definitely.
See, what pH meter do you use then?
Sorry?
What pH meter do you use?
Oh, sorry, the pH meter. I just get a couple of them from the garden centre like yours, and I use one of them, basically. But I send my sample away. I'm sending to a different one this year. There's one in Beverley, I think it's called, in Beverley, in Yorkshire somewhere. But I'm sure Andrew Cunningham will correct me if I'm wrong. He'll be listening, But then, when it comes back and it says, I meant to put one on actually, the sheet of all the results of the soil test. But when I then use my pH meter, it does come back similar to what they've said within a point. So
I think you tend to use an average reading rather than just stick it in once and go, that's what it is.
Correct. I go all over the plot with it. Yeah. And do you use anything for the conductivity or anything?
Now and again, I'll stick a pH meter in.
Yeah.
Everything else is by the plants. If the plants are growing, then I've never yet done a soil test.
Have you not?
A soil test, so I'll stick with it with what's going on.
Fair enough. Again, it's like we said earlier, it's horses for courses. You do what you do. And if it works, stick to it.
It's only because I forget. It's too late.
I always try something different every year, but not on my main plants, on a few other plants. I always try something different because you might just hit on something.
So we've got a question there. Trevor Stevenson, if entering a Terry Clark who could not grow Challenger, what would you suggest as the entry for the large or giant category? Well, my first suggestion would be learn how to grow Challenger.
Yeah.
I don't believe there is anyone that cannot grow it. You just haven't found the right method.
Yeah, for you.
I can't get the stems strong enough. I can get the blooms, but I can't get the stems strong enough.
Throw potash at it.
What?
Use potash, grow it stronger.
Throw potash at it and don't be frightened of putting a handful on and then watering it in.
Okay.
But aside of that, if you did, you've still got to grow something you want to grow and enjoy growing. If you don't enjoy it, but I would say Neris Trisha or a cord, which is very similar. But I personally think Neris Trisha is more of a natural large than what a cord is.
Yes.
Okay.
Or any of the more formally formed giants, like
I'd go for Valentine.
Alvis, any of those. I wouldn't suggest any of the Brins, because you've got to, within Brins, you'll be lucky if you find a judge that loves them, but you'll hate it when you find a judge that don't. Because I've judged a 12 for a few years, and I've very rarely ever seen a decent Brin of any.
It's not a case of that, David. It's a case of, do they conform?
Yeah, and to
the ideal.
They're fine when they're judged against like flowers. When you've got 12 different varieties, everyone's going to have them, so it doesn't matter. But you're putting it up and asking a judge to see if he can find less faults in 3 fairly informally formed flowers than he can in 3 challengers or 3 Neris Trisha. Well, he'll always find more faults in a giant deck, and it is very good. And I personally think that you'll probably get equal points with a vase of good giants to a vase of probably better challenger, but you'll get a more equal point because they get bored of seeing them. When you're judging a line of challengers, and you've got 15 vases of challenger, they end up being ordered in first best to 15th worst. And then your vase giants come out and they get judged straight against the standard vase, not against the 14th best vase of challenger. And having that something different, the same with Dave's choice. It's nothing. I've got nothing against Mary's. I love it. I've grown it, won with it. But all the Marys get lined up, and the Dave's choice goes straight against the best one, against the middle. Yeah. And I think that can nick you a point or two for just by.
Why do you think I'm not frightened to bring different entries in, different blues in? Precisely that. When I'm pulling up a vase of mediocre Mary's Demander against yours or David's or Phil Watson's, I'd far sooner put Barbie Surprise up. Because I know it gets judged differently. As you say, against the standard. They should all get judged against the standard, but they do tend to line them up. That's first, that's second, that's third, that's fourth. How much is the first one worth against the standard? And if it's more, then it starts off. If the standard's 22, and that's 24, then it's 24, 23, 22, 21, usually.
It's just about playing the game a little bit, but just think sensibly, think form, think what the judge can't take so many points off of.
That's it. Yeah. If I could grow a Mario cord, David, without it spotting, I'd grow that.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's Trisha, I'd grow that because it is different. And it's like you say, they've got to then judge it against something else. Anyway, there you go.
Thank you.
Andrew Cunningham's got a question.
Yeah, Ian, your soil looks lovely. light soil.
Yes,
I live 800 feet above sea level, and it's very clay soil. Now, my cactuses are nothing compared to yours, but my decks are far better.
They will be.
Yeah.
They will be.
Yeah.
They will be. You get heavy soil, you will get a better. You will get better decks, definitely.
So, is there any way around that, do you think, or
you just have to dig loads of manure in, or loads of spent mushroom? You know, that's what I'd be inclined to do.
Right.
And just working it, and it's just a case of putting as much as you can in over a regular, you know, well, every year really. I would be doing that with clay.
I think if history tells that cactus have always grown better on light soil, X on heavy. So, and the old school used to be never manure your cactus bed, but you need to get organic matter in it to lighten the soil.
That's it.
The mushroom compost or anything that is not so manure-y. I mean, that's one reason why I've always used straw and dug the straw into the ground. Yes, it loses some nitrogen in breaking down, but it's a non-offensive, apart from when it's got weed killer in it, a non-offensive soil improver. And I'm on clay, you know, Essex clay, we build bricks. But getting the sort of 8 inches of straw dug into it every year, very long to lighten the soil without really messing about with the food.
I live in Clayton in Bradford, and that tells you they used to take the clay away by the ton. So that's what it used to be. So
so just organic stuff and grit and sand if you can to improve the drainage.
Yeah.
But that's all you can do is keep improving, working on the same bit of ground. Keep growing the cactus in the same bit of ground. Don't keep moving them around.
That's it. Exactly.
You'll never get there. So just have a know, hey, that's my cactus beds. I'm going to throw loads into that and improve it as quick as I can.
No, thank you for that.
So, Andrew, if your decks are better than mine, get the Terry Clark entered, man.
No, what I'm saying is my decks are far better than my cactuses.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know.
But you don't need a cactus to win a Terry Clark, so it's all right.
You don't.
It's for courses, isn't it? So
you don't. Right. Yeah. Very good.
Thank you.
Caught up with questions? Any more questions? If you haven't worked out the chat button, just unmute and ask. Someone called. Go on, Tricky.
Doesn't matter. No. It was only while Andrew was talking. You were talking about manure and mushroom compost, but you said it, Dave. I would have suggested to find some, like a ton bag of horticultural sharp sand.
Yeah.
It's I think with light soils, it's not necessarily the lightness; it's the drainage is what you're gaining from it.
Yeah, like you said, he's on heavy clay, so putting sand in there might just, like you said, one bed.
Yeah, I've also found that I've always grown on heavy clay. I've grown on about 3 plots in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Trying to start again, more clay. But I've found out of all the cactus, the oakwoods don't seem to mind it.
Yeah.
You know, they will take a heavy ground. They'll take feeding, so they get fed. I think the kiwis will react adversely to it, but oakwood seems to, or any of the goldcrest seem to tolerate the heavier soil.
I think that's why Ronnie used to grow years ago a reasonable kiwi, but as over the years the temperatures are rising so much in the south now, the backs used to fall out when they're half open. And no matter how much water you put into them, it ain't happening anymore.
Well, that has started happening for us. Certainly, I mean, I haven't grown an oakwood now for a year or two, but it started happening on the cactus that once we started getting into August and was getting 4, 5, 6 days that are 30, 35, 34.
Yeah.
The flowers are getting half open and the backs were just going before it developed. And it's been happening. I know Dave's had the same problem the last couple of years.
Tend not to get that with ours. What you tend to get when we get quite one of them things where we get it hot, then the kiwis tend to look like this cup and saucer job.
Yeah, split.
The centres come up, and then the bottom splits down.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, if it doesn't last for quite some time, then as it cools down, they go back.
Mm.
But if it's any length of time, then you just forget it and cut them off, you know?
Yeah. We're even finding with like Mary's, even the heat is splitting petals. It's making the petals in the face.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with rain or wind or anything.
No,
The speed of development's making the petals split. So we're having to, it's getting worse every year. It's just trying to adapt to it, really.
Like the map at Diane a couple of years ago, David.
Yeah, there was only 2 on there. You overreacted.
They were doing it again, each blood.
Must have missed pulling them. How important do you feel it is to have covers? We don't have big structure over plants, but do use pop-up gazebos rather than nothing. Yeah,
You don't need
if the weather's bad.
Sorry?
It's only important if the weather's bad.
Yeah.
It's covers are up there for those 2 days that you wish you were pleased are there. And sometimes the ideal covers would be roll-on, roll-off ones.
Yeah.
On a reasonable day, you just push the things. You used to get greenhouses on wheels that you could wheel over crops. But you'll probably find that most of the time the plants will be growing out without cover. It's only in those couple of occasions where the weather turns, the wind comes, that you need them there. But bigger things without them, you're...
David Boyd always said if he could get away with it, he would grow Challenger without covers.
Yeah, it's hard enough, probably.
So, yeah. But I'd be inclined to stick with the smaller varieties, and then you don't really need covers with the smaller varieties. But certainly on the bigger ones, if you want to compete, and I mean compete, you need covers of some description. But I could never get away with building the covers. All right, mine look flimsy, but they're not. I couldn't build them like David builds them because they just blow away. Just like happened to you last year, didn't it?
Yeah.
You had a bit of bad weather, like the northern weather, and they just collapse. So you've got to build something substantial.
They're very big kites, otherwise, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right. Any other questions?
I got one for Ian. When you say with the moonlight's in your apical bud, it's almost got colour in it when you stop it.
Say that again.
What you're saying about your moonlights, your apical bud would have colour in it when you put a stop in it.
Yeah.
Would your lower laterals not be a bit overdeveloped? Would you not?
No, I find that moonlights for me, they tend to throw an awful lot of side shoots, and they don't all develop quite at the same time.
So you just pinch out the wick.
So I tend to, even if it's got a little bit of colour in the bud, I would take them off, and I'm looking at the end of the first week in July before I do that physical stop, although the plant's already been stopped itself because it's budded up. Yeah. And what I tend to do then is I look at them, and again, you've got to make that decision. Am I going to chop them down, or am I going to then go on a run on? Now, I'm quite happy to run on moonlights as well. People say you can't do it. You can, definitely. But it's just selecting the right break and the right shoot at the time. But you've got to remember, when you're running something on, you've got to take all the other little side shoots off the lateral, and that becomes your lateral then.
Yeah.
All right. And again, don't grow to ring. Grow shorter than ring. A decent judge will judge it properly. There you go.
Haven't managed to find a decent judge yet.
Well, you're not entering it, are you? You can do it next year then.
Yeah. We do say this about rings and sizes, but as exhibitors, we all know as judges size parameters and judge on quality of flower. But as an exhibitor, there is a much smaller parameter that we accept as being the right parameter for our own flowers, and it's different. You have to have different hats on, but I don't want to see 1/2 inch of daylight around my miniature ring. I want to see inch.
Yes.
And in my mind, the way I grow it and the flowers I'm growing and the way I'm trying to produce the flowers, they are at their best at that size.
Of course.
The body and the shape of the bloom is right. If you probably grow with a much lighter hand, they will conform to all the ideals at a slightly smaller size. Because if they're smaller with the petals the size that mine have, they start looking coarse. So it's sort of the balance of it. But there's a few varieties that you have to sort of, well, I know I've changed my entries in, not national because I never know who's judging, but I will see judges judging at shows and know what they're likely to judge and change my entry to the judge that's going to judge it.
Yeah.
Which we shouldn't have to do with the NDS hat on. No, you don't do it. But as an exhibitor, you want your flowers to get the best results possible. And I know certain people will fall head over heels over a raggedy old bring where others will tear pieces out of them. And if he's judging the class, I'll choose which to go in.
Yeah.
It's just what you do.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Mr. Duffy.
Hello, Mr. Duffy.
So I'm in the car. It's pitch black. No, I just wanted to say I thoroughly enjoyed it. The talk from both you, and I'll probably grow a little bit of the way I grow. So I try not to maybe feeds. So somewhere in the middle. And I wanted to say to the people with the cactus, don't be stuck on growing straight cactus. The semi-cactus will work better on the heavier ground. The candies, the goldcrests, as David said, and the lemon elegans will work well. And I do all right with the cactus, the semi-cactus. Challenger's a work in progress for me. So we'll see how it goes this year. But I really enjoyed watching the talk from both of you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymondo.
Can't wait to see Lemon Elegance in the winning Terry Clark exhibit.
Well, you might do.
I think, however lovely it might be and how good it was, I think it might have just had its day to the modern day.
It probably lacks 2 or 3 rows of petal.
Yeah.
So you already started with the daily with the thing.
But last year, every Goldcrest, and I grow Cherwell. Well, I did grow Cherwell. Last year I grew Cherwell, Lemoncrest and Oakwood. And the fimming I got on all of them, that was my problem last year, was fimming. Really bad. All right across the face of them all just before Abercorn. So I didn't have the cut I wanted. So Lemon Elegance didn't fim, but I hadn't done anything with it. I didn't even disbud it. So I didn't have it to use for Abercorn. But it's a get out of jail if we get that 33, 34 degree heat again.
Yeah.
So
if you've got the space to grow them, then yeah, grow them as a backup. It's your option again that we talk about. But lots of people haven't got that. I mean, I grow about 600 plants, but I only grow probably about 400 for showing, really, because I'm daft and I like to see other things. How many do you grow, David? How many do you grow?
I grow on both. If I filled both plots up to their max, it'd be 400. But
yeah,
the giants.
Well, you used to grow a lot more than that, didn't you?
I used to grow 800. Yeah, 800 was where I was.
And I think Mr. Spencer's cut down a little bit. He's only growing 1,000 now. Apparently he's on here. He'll answer in a minute. Apparently he's getting old now. He's getting too old to grow all these plants, so he's cutting down. I think he has actually managed to cut down. Normally I'm cutting down to 600 and then 800 get planted. But I think it's been tying his hands up and growing less. Is he double right? All respect to him. He's a brilliant grower.
There's a question there. What was the best vase you've ever grown?
Go on then, David.
I would say it has to be 5 Bleepers Go at the Twilight.
Yeah.
8-point bars in the Terry Clark. Best
Yeah,
show.
definitely. Yeah.
Be yours.
Mine would have to be Kiwi Glorious. It'd have to be.
We've got our loves. Trevor, why did you change to growing all giants? Because I'm a masochist. I like a challenge, and I think for me at the moment to compete properly in Terry Clark's in individual championships, I certainly up till now I've only been allowed to cover one plot, which is only say less than 200 plants or about 200 plants. I like to do it properly, and I've done it, I suppose, as well. I've done it. I've done the apprenticeship. I've won it. I quite enjoy new challenges, and I'd like to. My aim, bold aim, might be is that I want to win the 12, and I want to get the best exhibit and show with the 12 giants. That hasn't happened for many years. Set a new standard, and then I'll probably try something else.
Collarettes next time, David.
Huh?
Collarettes next time.
Water lilies will be first.
What?
Give me 2 years, I'll be there.
Good man, good man.
Trust me, there'll be probably 8-inch water lilies.
Yeah.
Apparently, your best vase was the 5 spuds.
The 5 what?
Yeah, this is Andrew.
Oh, 5 potatoes, yeah.
Yeah.
5 potatoes. Yeah. I resisted putting potatoes on tonight. They cheated though, David. They interfered with that entry because when I ringed all the potatoes, they all went through. But one of the judges had turned one of the potatoes round so it didn't go through.
Happens. I guess Mark is Mark Patterson. But do you think you can beat Tony Kingdom? I think anyone would be a fool.
Anybody can beat anybody.
Tony Kingdom, but I can beat anyone, and I've just got to get past Tony, Mark, JJ, Ian Hill. so that's why I love the challenge. That's the challenge, but I'm trying to do it differently, and that's makes it fun.
Yeah.
Any more?
Anybody else?
Good.
I've got to try and